Hello, my friends, students of yoga. This is an introduction to Yantra yoga, which is one of the least known forms of yoga. And it's quite mathematical. It deals with the geometry of the universe, actually, and the geometry of everything that is manifest in this world. What we're finding in scientific studies is that there's a certain geometry in the reality of how electromagnetic waves of possibility snap into electrons, molecules, and molecules themselves have a certain geometry. And in studies of sound, some of you may know, maybe we'll demonstrate this in one of the videos, where you have sand on a metal plate and you put sound into it, and the sand will create a geometric symmetrical form, which is called a yantra or a mandala. So Yantra yoga deals with a study of how this happens, how sound is vibration, becomes geometry, and travels in waves, and waves go over a period of time where you have hertz, a wavelength. What we hear is from 20 hertz cycles per second to 20,000 hertz. Below that, we don't hear it anymore, we can feel it, but above that, we don't hear it. Dogs can hear higher up to like 25,000. So it's all vibration, it's all measurable vibration, and Yantra Yoga is a mathematical system to measure the energies, the time frames, and the relationship between mathematics and geometry. Again, if you've ever studied trigonometry in school, you have to know mathematics and you have to know algebra, and then you get into trigonometry, which starts to unfold or explain how angles and distances make patterns, and you can calculate all of these things. This has all been calculated thousands of years ago. This kind of mathematics was known to the Egyptians, to the ancient Hindus, and the science of Yantra Yoga comes out of that. Now, what you have on my left here is a painting of a man that I did from seeing things on the inside, inner vision, which I painted back in 1974. I was seeing a lot of things and explaining, studying the chakras, and I had to put it down into a picture, and the picture contains all kinds of little details of information. So you know the term, phrase, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So this is a picture to me which is worth many thousands, because it contains a lot of the information that I learned by studying in India for a couple of years with Dr. Swami Gitananda. So I'm talking about the geometry. You can see that there are certain shapes and forms here. This is sacred geometry. It's a language of its own. It's a language that your subconscious understands. It's a language that the universal mind works in. Rather than just words in any language, there are words and vibrations, but the language is in picture. And if you look at ancient languages like the Egyptians, hieroglyphs are all pictures. And the pictures give you a better idea. Words, it's one word at a time to try and follow an idea, but a picture gives you the whole idea in one shot. So we have Muladhara chakra, Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata, Vishuddha, and Ajna. And each one has its geometry. This one is a square, 4 petals in standard mythology of Hinduism. This one has 6 petals, which reflects the water element, which always falls into patterns of 6. If you look at snowflakes or water crystals, the geometry is in there. So it's not made up. It's not created by artists of humankind. It's part of the universal mind. So understanding this geometry of energy, waves, and chakras is an important part of developing the mind to a higher level of understanding how things fit together. So as we go into 10 petals of the third chakra, 12 of the fourth, 16 of the fifth, and 2 giving us the duality in the sixth chakra. So these pictures, again, let's just take one example. This one has a star in the center, which is made of 2 triangles coming together to make a 6-pointed star. Here we have the triangle. There's another one at the bottom. These come together in Anahata chakra. And here you have 12 petals. So you have the 12 signs of the zodiac, the 12 apostles, the 12 tribes of Israel. 12 is a recurring theme in humanity. And you'll find here an explanation of it. It has to do with this expansion of life, the creation of life coming from here in seed form that is coded into our DNA and unfolds according to certain patterns of characteristics and types and personalities which we find in astrology. So the study of Yantra Yoga is really a study of these energies. And we have 9 numbers. We have base 9, 0 doesn't count because it doesn't mean anything. Number 1 means the first chakra. Number 2 is Swadhisthana. Number 3 is Manipura. So all of these are energies, they're forces. And you calculate these forces, but you're not dealing with just numbers as numerology saying, well, you're a number 1 or you're a number 2. This goes much deeper to a level of your primary chakra. And in the next video, we'll get into the calculations of how to figure out what your strongest chakra is, what your base chakra, which is called Dharma Mega, or your birth path in a translation. And knowing that, there are certain qualities and characteristics that come from each one, and then you can calculate what are your strongest characteristics. And of course, there are the positive and the negative, depending on where you're at in your life, what cycles you're going through, and whether they're compatible chakras or not, because we have a primary chakra and then you have a secondary chakra for different periods of time. So the geometry that we're talking about here is something that has long been held in yoga. It was part of ancient Egyptian culture. And in Egypt, of course, everybody knows that the pyramids are very mathematically precise. And if you're looking at the first chakra, we have a square. And if you take the 4 corners of the square and fold them up, you end up with a pyramid. So this is all part of sacred geometry, an understanding of taking the forces of the first chakra that take you out into the 4 directions of the world and you bring them up. This is the awakening. This is Kundalini. This is part of the symbolism. And I learned about pyramids when I was studying in India because it's one of the symbols used in the first chakra. And I questioned why and found out why. And then years later I went to Egypt and realized, well, these guys were completely into yoga. The elite, the pharaohs, all the education of the high priests of Egypt, it was all very yogic. And there are it's covered up a lot, but there are some books on it. So they knew all about this. And now we go back into Western history, which goes back to the Greeks, who all went to Egypt. Many of the ancient Greeks went to Egypt for their education. They learned about some of this mathematics. And in later years, you have the Knights Templar and then the Freemasons, who all got their information during the days of the Crusades, which was down in these Holy Lands and connecting to Egypt. So Egypt had this knowledge of masonry. Basically means stone building, building with stone, and today it's stone and cement, bricks, as opposed to carpentry, which is working with wood. So the art of how to build went into how to build temples, because people build their houses out of lighter materials, bamboo and wood and whatever, or mud bricks, but the stone masons built temples and palaces. So they were more educated in the mathematics of how to design things, how to put things together. And after the Masons, Knights Templar, and the Masons returned, they're the ones responsible for building all of the cathedrals around Europe. They were the Masons, they were the builders, and they brought in this geometry. And again, there, everything is laid out in the four directions, connecting to the four petals of the first chakra, how things land on the world, how they are grounded and rooted in the world. This is part of a very sophisticated understanding of the energetics of the chakras, essentially. It all comes back to this. And in the Egyptian books, they talk about the chakras as much as they do in the Hindu mythology. So it's very much there. And the knowledge about all of this building and temple structure, why things are built in a certain way, have to do with our spiritual evolution. And if you build a temple that is geometrically accurate and connected to the forces of the four directions, to the earth and to the heavens, by walking into the temple, there's a certain uplifting effect. This is very much so in the pyramids, and why we have pyramid yoga here in Thailand. We're sitting in a pyramid now. We have the main pyramid up there, designed and built exactly according to the specifications of the Giza pyramid. This is all an important part. It's a subtle part that not everybody thinks about, but it's part of connecting to the universe, to the earth, to the universe. Being connected is part of the spiritual practices and the purpose of life, connecting to our more divine nature. As we go into the different aspects, we're going to begin by figuring out how to calculate what chakra you're born into, which goes back to your date of birth, and from there going into the periods of our life that are governed by different chakras as you go along. And then we're going to go into different days, years, as a calendar that is based on when you entered and began breathing. And then you're into a flow of chakras, alternating and rotating from there into all these different time cycles that actually, when you understand this calendar, it's telling you which energy is coming at you today, what you have access to, and then you know what's the best thing to do. If it's a very individual body energy, or if it's a social energy, or if it's a communication energy, they're all different. And when you understand the energies, which is understanding the chakras, then you can choose to do the right thing at the right time. You know what time it is. In the standard Gregorian calendar, there's no understanding of what's the difference between Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. In ancient times, Monday was the day of the moon. Sunday was the day of the sun. It all had a connection to universal energies and forces. We've lost that. So Yantra is a way of going back in to reconnect with the solar forces of the universe, the powers that activate, animate, and do everything. And when you have access to these, you can do more, you're more time efficient, knowing what to do at the right time. So there are many good advantages to knowing this. And it's something that I have used for now 50 years. And in teaching yoga and working with students over many years, I have used this, beginning with calculating what your primary chakra is, what your secondary chakra is, and going from there to understand the qualities, the energies and forces that make up the qualities of your character. And this can be worked out, and over that period of time that I'm talking about, 50 years for me, looking at many different people, I can verify that the calculations in this Yantra department are quite accurate. But like in astrology, you can say, oh, well, I'm a Libra and you're Aquarius. That's a very general thing. You can go much further into astrology and calculate the time you're born, what planets were at what position in the sky, and all of this. So in Yantra Yoga, it's not just, okay, I'm a number 6. My strongest chakra is here. My secondary chakra is 1. Then there's a lot of details of the characteristics of those, how they fit together, and some of them will be conflicting and cancel each other out. Other characteristics will be very compatible and reinforce each other. And then you add, from knowing your basic energies, your basic forces, to which forces are moving you through time. So it's a whole comprehensive study, which again comes back to an understanding of the chakras. So you need to begin by a little bit of understanding of these chakra forces, and then take it into expanding that understanding into more details of how these chakras affect you from the inside out. And then when we get into the time cycles, how the universal energies coming in at all times divide into different types of forces. So I mentioned only the first 6 chakras, and when you get into understanding them, you have to go into, again, the practice of yoga, which brings you into experiencing the forces as they are in you. Each one is a different experience. So we go from 1 to 6, and then the 7th chakra is consciousness. And it's above, it's the crown. It's above, and it's connecting to higher, to the universe. Ideally in yoga, you're bringing your energy up and you're raising your consciousness to this level. And the element of this is consciousness itself. And you go beyond into the universal field of energy, which is going from stars to planets, from light energy to dark energy and matter. And the 9 are part of universal forces. Number 9 was used by the Mayans. Number 9 is part of this system from India, and the Egyptians had 9 forces that were creating life on Earth. So the number 9 is recurring, and it deals with these forces. So scientifically, we go from here. This is gravity, this is covalence, this is transformation, this is expansion or repulsion, which creates expansion, electromagnetic vibration, magnetism. So these are very real scientific energies that you can play with and measure, and we do all kinds of things with. Then you get into consciousness, which is the biggest part of humans, or should be, and we're evolving our consciousness to become more and more aware. And from consciousness, we go into the source of power in the universe and the destiny. Source and destiny, beginning and end, past and future. You're dealing with higher esoteric terms, not connected to the body. So the study of yoga goes into a lot of the body stuff. This is where we are doing the work here on planet Earth. And when we leave our body, it's flying out.